10 strategies, written 500 years ago, still running your life today. Not in palaces, not in war rooms. In the meeting where you left feeling like you said something wrong, but you can't find what it was. In the relationship where you work harder every year and somehow feel less secure. In the conversation you replayed at 2 a.m., looking for the moment everything shifted. Machiavelli did not invent manipulation. He just wrote down what the powerful already knew, and what they have always counted on you never learning. You know that feeling after a hard conversation, where you walk to your car, close the door, and sit there for a second? Not angry, not upset, just off. Like something happened, but you cannot name it. Like you agreed to something you did not intend to agree to. Like you were present for the whole thing and somehow still missed it. You have been in that parking lot more than once. That confusion is not a personality flaw. It is not anxiety. It is not you being too sensitive. It is what happens when someone who knows the rules is playing against someone who does not know the game exists. That changes right now. I am going to walk you through 10 Machiavellian strategies, the exact moves that have ended careers, collapsed marriages, and built quiet empires inside the same Tuesday morning most people forget by noon. These are not ancient history. They are in your group chat, your last performance review, the dinner table last Thanksgiving. And I am saving the most disturbing one for last. The people running these plays count on one thing above everything else: that you never learn what they are called. That stops today. Manipulation. Most people think manipulation is pressure, someone pushing you towards something you do not want. That is not it. Here's what's actually happening. Manipulation does not push, it redirects. The skilled manipulator does not argue with what you want. They quietly adjust what you want until your genuine desire happens to be exactly their agenda. You have felt this. You walked into a conversation with one intention, you walked out with a completely different plan, and you felt good about it, motivated even, like it was your idea. It was not your idea. They did not convince you, they restructured the situation until the thing they needed felt like the thing you chose. The goal was never to change your mind. The goal was to make you certain your mind was never changed. That is exactly the point. So what do? After any conversation where a decision was made, give it 24 hours before you act. Ask one question. If I had thought of this alone, would I have landed here? If the answer takes longer than 3 seconds, trace the conversation back. The moment you name the redirect, you are already outside it. Deception. Everyone thinks deception means lying. That is not it. Here's what's actually happening. The most sophisticated deception contains 0 lies. It is assembled entirely from true statements, arranged in a specific sequence to produce a false conclusion. You have experienced this. Someone gave you information. Everything they said checked out. You verified the parts you could verify, and you walked away with a completely wrong picture. Because the picture was constructed, not from false pieces, from missing ones. What they didn't say was the entire point. The silence was load-bearing. The omission was the strategy. So what do? One question changes everything. What are you not telling me? Not aggressive, curious, just what is the part we haven't talked about yet? Watch what happens in their face before the answer comes. The person with nothing to hide doesn't pause. That pause is your answer. Appearance versus reality. Machiavelli wrote it plainly, and people have been uncomfortable with it for 5 centuries. You do not need to be trustworthy, you need to appear trustworthy. Most people read that as dark, cynical, something bad people do. Here's the thing. Everyone in a position of power understands this, whether they learned it consciously or not. The room decides how to treat you before you open your mouth. Your reputation enters before your body does. The Machiavellian player engineers that entrance deliberately. You have met this person. They walk in and something about them signals this is someone who knows things. You defer before you decide to. You trust before you verified. That feeling was manufactured, not faked, engineered. There is a difference. Faked falls apart. Engineered holds. So what do? Stop evaluating people on presence and start tracking pattern. Presence is something anyone can construct over the weekend. Pattern takes months to fake and years to sustain. Wait for the pattern. The appearance holds. Reality always eventually contradicts itself. Sowing discord. The Machiavellian does not just weaken enemies, they make sure allies cannot stay allies long enough to become a threat. Here's what's actually happening. Think about the last time your dynamic with someone shifted and you cannot pinpoint the conversation where it happened. There was just a creeping distance, a slight guardedness that wasn't there 6 months ago. Someone fed you something, a small comment, a framed observation. Something that landed and you didn't examine it, you just felt it. And on the other side of that relationship, the same person was having a different conversation. Now you're both slightly suspicious of each other, both a little isolated, both significantly less capable of coordinating against the one thing you had in common. The division was not organic, it was seeded. That is exactly the point. So what do? When a piece of information weakens a relationship, go directly to the person it's about. Not to accuse, just to check. The one who planted it is the last person who wants that direct conversation to exist. Breaking promises. Machiavelli wasn't subtle about this one. He said clearly, the prince who has kept all his promises is weaker than the one who is not. Most people read that and think that's just ruthlessness, amorality, the absence of integrity. That is not it. Here's what's actually happening. The person who breaks promises strategically doesn't do it carelessly. They do it with an exit already prepared, a context shift, a reframe that makes your expectation look unreasonable. You held them to what was said. Suddenly, the situation had changed. Circumstances evolved. To insist on the original agreement is to be rigid, difficult, someone who doesn't understand how things actually work. You walked out of that conversation somehow defending yourself for expecting follow-through. The promise was never the commitment. The promise was the first move. Your trust in it was the leverage. That is exactly the point. So what do? Write it down. Not formally, not confrontationally. Just confirming what we discussed. You're handling X by Friday, I'm handling Y. One message, sent immediately. Watch how quickly reframing becomes impossible when there is a timestamp. Rewarding and punishing. Nobody announces this system. There is no meeting where it is explained. It simply begins operating around you, and by the time you notice it, you are already inside it. Here's what's actually happening. You have been in an environment where certain behaviors felt warm and others felt cold, where speaking up in one direction produced energy and speaking up in another direction produced a particular kind of silence. And you adjusted. Of course you adjusted. Every intelligent person adjusts. You softened the objection before it fully formed. You framed the disagreement as a question. You saved the real concern for the drive home, where it was safe. You did not make a conscious decision to do any of that. That is not weakness, that is intelligence responding to a system. The problem is, it was someone else's system, and you were shaped by it without ever signing up for it. That is exactly the point. So what do? Ask yourself one thing: whose comfort am I managing right now, and did I choose to? If you cannot answer that clearly, you are inside a conditioning loop. Naming it is the exit. And now, the one most people never see coming. The one that works not because it is applied to you, but because it is applied to someone else while you watch.
Cultivating fear. Everyone understands that fear is a control mechanism. That is not the insight. Here's what's actually happening. The most effective fear in any system is never felt as fear. It is felt as common sense, as professional instinct, as the quiet awareness that certain things are simply not done. You have operated inside this. Think about the person at work who spoke up, who challenged something directly, who said publicly what most people only said in the car afterward. Think about what happened to them over the next 3 months. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be called retaliation, just a gradual erosion. Less access, a slightly different tone, opportunities that went to someone else, and everyone in that office watched it happen. Nobody said anything because nothing was technically happening, but every single person updated their behavior. You updated your behavior. You were never threatened, not once, but you learned through watching exactly where the ceiling was, and you stopped reaching above it. Here's the thing. That lesson was not an accident. You were never the target of the punishment. You were the audience. The lesson was always designed for you. They did not want your compliance. They wanted you to stop wanting more. So what do? The first move is the hardest and the most important. Recognize the ceiling before you call it reality. Because after enough time inside a manufactured climate, the manufactured limits start feeling like physics, like just how things are, like the natural order. They are not. They were built, and anything built can be seen through once you know to look. The ceiling is real. The ceiling is not permanent. Those are two different things. What just happened in this video was not a history lesson. Machiavelli was not the point. You were the point. Every strategy I just named, you have a specific memory attached to it, a face, a room, a conversation that made more sense in the last 20 minutes than it did the day it happened. That recognition you are feeling right now is not paranoia. It is clarity finally arriving. You now know the architecture, every move, every silence that was not silence, every warmth that was conditioning, and every distance that was punishment. Knowing this is not a burden, it is armor. The most dangerous person in any power dynamic is not the most tactical. It is the one who cannot be surprised. You cannot be redirected by a move you have already named. You cannot be isolated by discord you recognize the moment it is seated. You cannot be conditioned when you can see the system running in real time. This does not make you cold. It does not make you untrusting. It makes you precise. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in 1513. He was not teaching cruelty. He was describing a world that had always existed and simply refused to pretend otherwise. That world is your office, your family, your closest relationships. Power has always moved this way. The only variable, the only thing that has ever changed anything is whether you could see it. Now, you can. Every room, every conversation, every ceiling someone built and called the sky.
The most dangerous person in the room is the one who cannot be moved. That is now you.